Everything you've been told about how societies are controlled is a lie. Here is why. Big Brother isn't watching you through a screen. You're watching him, and you're doing it entirely by choice. There's a hidden reason why modern populations willingly surrender their power, and it has absolutely nothing to do with fear or force. Your mind has been quietly hijacked by a 2,000-year-old political weapon disguised as your absolute favorite entertainment. Once you see how this ancient blueprint is actively shaping our world right now, you are literally never going to look at your screens, your sports, or your society the same way again. The origin of this massive cultural blind spot actually traces back to a really surprising moment in 1984. American media scholar Neil Postman was at the Frankfurt Book Fair, sitting on a panel discussing George Orwell's famous dystopian novel 1984. But Postman stood up and dropped a stunning, counterintuitive thesis on the audience. He argued that we were all looking out for the wrong type of oppression. We were frantically looking for the boot on the face when we really should have been looking out for a smiling face offering us endless amusement. So what's really fascinating here is the stark contrast between two completely different fears for our future. George Orwell feared that what we hate will ruin us. He warned of a world controlled by inflicting pain, state violence, heavy censorship, and constant fear. But Postman, he argued that our modern world was actually much better reflected by Aldous Huxley's vision in Brave New World. Huxley feared that what we love will ruin us. In his prophecy, society is controlled by inflicting pleasure. The public is oppressed by their absolute addiction to amusement and endless distraction. Because, think about it, there is absolutely no need for wardens or prison gates when a population willingly sacrifices its own rights for a perpetual round of entertainments. Now, you might be wondering, is this strategy of control through amusement a modern invention? Not at all. It's actually an incredibly ancient weapon. The phrase bread and circuses, or Panem et Circenses in Latin, was famously coined by the Roman satirical poet Juvenal somewhere around the late 1st or early 2nd century CE. Juvenal was basically lamenting this devastating psychological and political transformation of the Roman citizen. He watched as the people, who used to bestow military commands, hold high civil offices, and carry immense democratic responsibilities, essentially sold their rights as free men. They traded all their political agency for nothing more than full bellies and exciting games. And the crazy part is, this didn't just happen overnight. Let's look at the bread part of the equation, known historically as the cura innone. This actually started back in 123 BC as a temporary emergency measure, just subsidized grain to help out a struggling, dispossessed population. But watch what happens over time. Within a few decades, politicians realized the immense, undeniable power of this system, and they made the grain dole completely free. By the imperial era, it was fully weaponized into a permanent bribe. Politicians and emperors used this massive logistical distribution of free grain to ensure mob loyalty and maintain absolute social order, completely bypassing the need for true republican governance. Then, of course, we have the circus half of the strategy. Think of the brutal, visceral gladiatorial games. Classicists are quick to point out that it was specifically the wordless nature of this public spectacle that made it so incredibly effective. The Roman emperors hosted this spectacular, over-the-top violence in the Colosseum because it completely absorbed the attention of the public. It required absolutely no critical thought, only pure, base reaction. It served to effectively mask the underlying decay of the state. The populace was just way too captivated by the blood in the arena to even notice the loss of their own civic liberties. But using entertainment to govern goes way, way beyond mere distraction, which brings us to an incredibly profound shift in perspective. Anthropologist Clifford Geertz wrote a landmark book in 1980, studying the pre-colonial 19th century state in Bali, which he termed the Negara, or the theater state. Geertz argued that the rulers of this island were actually less interested in administering the day-to-day practical lives of the Balinese, and far more interested in dramatizing their own rank through massive, highly organized spectacles. This concept flips our entire understanding of politics totally upside down. As Geertz so brilliantly put it, power serves pomp, not pomp power. He revealed a system where mass rituals, massive cremations, and dramatic ceremonies didn't just support the government, they literally were the government. It was metaphysical theater. The ritual itself was the primary purpose of the culture. This proves something wild. Political power can be entirely performative. The spectacle isn't just a distraction from the state's activities, the spectacle is the core activity of the state itself. Okay, so let's fast forward to our modern digital age. This exact same ancient blueprint is currently playing out on an unprecedented global scale through elite sports.
What was once the chariot race or the gladiator arena is now the FIFA World Cup, Formula One, and the massive global golf tours. Wealthy authoritarian states are recognizing the absolutely unparalleled cultural power of these spectacles to shape global narratives and control exactly what the public focuses on.
Researchers have identified a group of new authoritarian regimes, specifically looking at Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, that are pouring immense wealth into Western global elite sports. Now, their public motives are pretty layered. According to academic sources, they're pursuing economic gain, they want to improve their domestic citizens' health, and they are actively chasing global recognition. However, human rights advocates and researchers point out a deeply contested motive behind all of this, utilizing these sports to mask human rights abuses. This is a strategy you've probably heard of called sports washing. These states act as major disruptors, buying into the cultural prestige of sports to fundamentally reshape how global entertainment is played, and more importantly, how it's consumed. And the modern psychological danger here is incredibly clear. We tend to forget the bad things about a country when its sports team is exciting to watch. It's the exact same mechanism Juvenal observed back in ancient Rome. When national teams do well, or a mega event is spectacularly hosted, it generates intense excitement and widespread unity. And this spectacle is actively used, according to researchers, to silence political criticism, sow doubt about human rights records, and heavily erode trust in democratic institutions. Just like the Roman mob, our sheer, unadulterated excitement over the games allows the circus to totally wash away the realities of the state. However, humanity hasn't always just rolled over and accepted the circus. There is actually a powerful, hopeful, historical antidote to this psychological hijacking. It emerged during the early 20th century labor movements, and it's famously connected to the 1912 Lawrence textile strike in Massachusetts. This movement was led to a large extent by women fiercely fighting for fair wages and dignified working conditions. And the slogan they inspired provides a profound philosophical counterargument to that ancient Roman formula. When you put these two philosophies side by side, they are worlds apart. Bred in circuses is inherently top-down. It treats citizens as a mob that just needs to be managed and pacified with empty thrills and endless distraction. But bred in roses, a phrase that actually originated from a 1910 speech by suffragist Helen Todd, is a bottom-up demand. It treats people as dignified humans. The bread represents basic material survival, fair wages, and shelter. But the roses represent the profound human right to a deeply meaningful life, access to music, art, education, and nature. It beautifully argues that hearts starve just as well as bodies. Bringing this full circle back to Neil Postman's chilling analysis from 1984, we can see exactly what is at stake here. He warns us that when we allow our cultural life to be redefined as a perpetual round of entertainments, when literally everything from news to politics is packaged merely to amuse us, we lose our very sense of what it means to be well-informed. We become a passive audience rather than active citizens. And when our public discourse dissolves into a cheap vaudeville act, culture death is a very clear possibility. We end up voluntarily closing the prison gates on ourselves simply because we are way too entertained to care. So the ultimate question you must ask yourself the next time you open your social media feed, tune in to a massive sporting event, or watch the political news cycle is this. In a world fundamentally engineered to endlessly amuse and distract you, are you demanding the dignity and true understanding of your roses, or are you simply settling for the circus and amusing yourself to death?